And welcome to Writers on Writers, a virtual broadcast talking to other writers about, wait for it, writing. I am your host, writer, Danielle Bannister, and this month's broadcast theme is women's fiction. And because of that, my guest today is
R.J. Keller,
writer of all things women's fiction. Welcome, RJ. Now, before we start and dive into this, I think it's important to let people know that we're really good friends.
Yes.
We live in the same state. We live just a few minutes away from each other.
Yep.
If it wasn't for the pandemic, we'd probably be seeing each other in person on a multiple basis. We actually have a video chat show, if you will, called Between Two Couch Cushions that we record monthly broadcasts on. So we're pretty familiar with each other, and
we vaguely know each other.
Yes, you may have answered all of these questions I'm about to ask you, but I'm going to ask them anyway, because there might be people who don't know the answers to these questions.
In that case, I will answer them.
Excellent. Now, before we dive into the fun world that is women's fiction, could you just tell us a little bit about you, maybe your book, Waiting for Spring, and maybe when you knew when you wanted to be a writer?
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a lot of questions.
It is, I know. I can
okay.
refresh your mind if you need it.
It may come to that. But so I believe the first thing is tell you a little bit about me.
Yes.
Okay. So yes, I am RJ Keller, hashtag not my real name, but I think we're going to talk about that later.
We are.
Yes. So, basically, I have written exactly one book, but
it's a massive book, though.
It is a massive book. In fact, I think that one of the reviews says it could double as a murder weapon. So if that's going to be a selling point at all, I just want to put that out there into the universe.
It's like three books long.
It is. It's not a short book. It's huge. But yes. So I guess that's not true. I have written more than one book. I've only published one book. So that was a little bit misleading, but always working on something. And what was the next question?
Well,
I've already forgotten.
We've got that.
Okay, yes.
A little bit about the book that you've written.
Oh, yes. Okay. So, women's fiction, clearly that is our theme today. So it basically, it is about a woman who is a an artist / cleaning lady. She lives in the boonies of Maine, gets divorced from her childhood sweetheart kind of husband, town pariah. And so to escape all of her problems, she moves to a brand new town, even farther in the boonies of Maine, because of course she's trying to escape all of her issues. And I think, as every human alive knows, that's just not possible because you just bring your issues with you. And so it's about her trying to start over, trying to leave her baggage in the past, but of course, kind of comes along with her. And there she meets a new man, of course, and gets involved with basically just some, stuff going on in the town. I guess that's not the synopsis on the back of the book. That would be a really sloppily written synopsis, but that's the basic gist.
When did you know that you wanted to write a book and publish it? Like, when did you know that this is something you wanted to do?
Right. Well, honestly, I have been writing since I can remember. I think that a big advantage I had, I literally can't remember learning to read. I just, as far as back as I can remember, I've just always known to read because my mom always read to us, right? And my grandmother, everybody I knew was just always nose in a book. And so if you're the kind of person who doesn't remember never reading, like me, that kind of translates into wanting to tell stories. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as I learned how to write and put those stories down on paper, so I'm talking maybe 5 or 6 years old, I've been writing since then. And of course, when I was a kid, I always had these vague images. When I grow up, I want to be a writer, without really knowing what the heck that means. And then of course you grow up and realize, unless you're Stephen King or J.K. Rowling or whoever, you're not going to be just a writer. So anyway, fast forward to about 2005, 2006, I kind of got to that point in my life. I was in my mid-30s. I had really read about every book possible. Okay. My family had just moved to a new town. I didn't really know anybody there. I was feeling very lonely. So I kind of haunted the library. I haunted Barnes and Noble in Augusta. And I just really got tired of seeing nothing but either, those books, I hate this term, but they called chick lit. I hate
Uh-huh.
that term. Like I really do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But pretty much in the mid 2000s, like everything was like Sex and the City redone. And you look at the covers and there are all these like pastel colors with like high heel shoes on the cover, and I'm like, this has nothing to do with anything in my life. I live in the boonies, right? And so I don't want to read this kind of story anymore. Just kind of done with it. Had its heyday, but it was really hard to find anything else that I hadn't already read. And I thought, I kind of wanted to read something that spoke to the experiences that I was having, the struggles, and my friends, my family. But generally speaking, the only types of books I could find that really spoke to like Maine life weren't written by people who lived in Maine, not counting Stephen King, obviously, right? But I'm not ever going to write horror. That's just not my thing. So I remembered that Toni Morrison said, if there's a book you want to read and you can't find it, then you have to write it. So I'm like, all right, how hard can it be to write a book? I mean, whatever. I'll just go home, rack up the computer. But anyway, so that was kind of the inspiration. Not so much what did I want to write, but more what was I sick of seeing? And let me just like write the opposite of that. So it was more
So
reaction.
what kind of book did you want to read more?
Exactly. Yeah.
You
and
wanted
so,
to find something that
yeah,
you
just something a
like
little
to pick up off the shelf.
exactly, something gritty, something real, not something about someone who lives in Manhattan, which I'd never been to, knew nothing about other than TV. Just I wanted something that felt real to me and that would feel real, to the people that I knew.
Something that that's always resonated with me about your book is being able to see sort of that poverty line lifestyle that you don't really see a lot of, because it's not glamorous and it's not
Right.
Your typical escapism sort of story.
Right.
It's gritty and it's real life, and I think sometimes it's hard to capture that feeling, but I think your book does a really good job of
Thank you.
capturing that.
Thanks. I think that a trap that a lot of writers who attempt to write that point of view is, if you've never really been poor or lived like where that's your world, you're kind of bringing some assumptions, like you're looking at, oh, this must be what it's like. And of course, I mean, I was poor since pretty much when I was born. It was just, that was my world. So it was just kind of, easier to get that. So,
Yeah. The life experiences really help in
right.
something
Yeah.
this genuine. You mentioned the chick lit, and so I want to talk on that a little bit.
Okay, sure.
Our theme today is, of course, women's fiction, and
right.
chick lit is sort of the slang, if you will, for the genre of women's fiction. What do you think that type of book means, and has that shifted at all over time?
Right.
Do you like the title of women's fiction? Would you prefer it be something else, or are you comfortable with it now?
Well, I want to tell you, like, at first when I was attempting to get my book published and realized that I needed to find a genre for it, that was kind of the genre that made sense. I'm a woman, it's a woman protagonist, it speaks to women's problems, but I was really resentful of the fact that it was called women's fiction, because there's no such thing as, men's fiction. There's just, there's thrillers, there's mysteries, there's, horror and women's fiction. It's like, come on, and so I'm not gonna lie, it really irritated me, and I never wanted to like lean into that, but also realizing that you do have to market it somehow. You do have to categorize it, because that is how readers kind of pick up like those cues. This is a book that I want to read. And I'll also admit that my kind of point of view about that has shifted, I would say, in the last 5 years or so, because Yeah, because I think that like now how I kind of view like the term women's fiction or the genre, if you will, and even then I think anyway, but clearly I still have mixed feelings. However, I think how I try to look at it now and how I really do look at it is it's it speaks to issues and life situations that women do go through, right? And there is a difference of experience. I mean, obviously, if you get 100 women in a room, they're different, you know, their experience is going to be different, but there are some commonalities in not only the types of situations we go through, but you know, the ways that we interpret those and the way we deal with them. So that's kind of what I try to lean into now when it comes to that you know, descriptive, you know, term or genre or whatever. So I can't say like I've 100% embraced it yet, but I guess I'm like okay with it.
Mhm.
You know, I
Would you
will
say
say
that?
I
Go
oh, go
ahead.
ahead. I was gonna say I do want to say like the term chick lit still does bother me because like I mean I don't know, should I like keep my language nice here?
Go ahead. You
Okay,
go,
cool.
go for it.
Okay, because you know me. So it's like to me, chick lit, it's like, is there such a thing as dick lit? Like, you know, it just come on. It's just it's so I really that
Mhm.
irritates me. But like women's
Yeah.
fiction, I'm getting better with.
Well, and then what I was gonna say is, do you think that the label of women fiction blocks men from
Mm,
picking up your book? They go, oh, well, that's definitely not a book for me. Do you think men would enjoy Waiting for Spring? Or do you think that there's enough of a women's slant on it that perhaps that's not your target audience anyway?
right. Well, it's funny because when I initially wrote it, I was not writing it like for women. Obviously, it's about a woman. It's got a woman's point of view. Um, I do think you know the genre women's fiction does alienate, you know, I think a guy would be less likely to go just into the women's fiction section. So I do think that maybe that's part of my irritation with the title. Like I would say, for example, I mean, look at movies. Okay, so there's no, I mean, yes, chick flick, but again, I have a hard time with that. But you know, generally speaking, you know, you've got comedy, you've got
Mhm.
horror, you've got drama, and I really I feel that you know the world of literature would be served better with like those kind of terms. So like if we're talking about that and the term women's fiction didn't exist, I would just label Waiting for Spring as either fiction or drama
Mhm.
or dramedy. Is that's drama and comedy together, right? So
Right.
it's so like I do think that if there were better, you know, terms for it, it would be easier to market to, you know, guys who just want to read a good story. Now that having been said, um I have heard from men who've read it who really like it, and a lot of it is I never would have picked this book up, but like so and so recommended it to
Yeah.
me. So
Yeah.
so
So it's
yeah, I
almost like
think
you have to ignore that label,
yeah.
especially for word of mouth, because
Yes. Yeah.
that's that's where
Yeah.
you're going to snag some of those that aren't necessarily reading it. So yeah, it's sort
Yeah.
of like one of those necessary evils because you have to pick a category and there's only so many categories that you're
Right.
allowed to pick. So
Yes.
you do sort of have to embrace a genre, even if it doesn't necessarily align perfectly
Right.
with what your story is. So,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Always a
um,
challenge.
it is what it is. So you talked a little bit earlier about how you decided that you wanted to write Waiting for Spring.
Mm-hmm.
How did that idea come to you, like that particular story? Because
Right.
I'm assuming that is not an event that literally happened in your life and you just
No.
changed the names to protect the innocent sort of thing.
Right.
Like how does a story that's quite complex in my opinion uh,
Right.
come to the brain?
So, so something I've been thinking about a lot, you know, previous to writing is, um, okay, so I worked for a very long time at like convenience stores, working the overnight shift because you know my husband and I you know we had kids at the time, they were young, and who the hell in the boonies of Maine can afford daycare, right? So he would work, you know, days, I would work nights, and I remembered that there is this woman in town who had like a reputation for being a slut. The reason why is she was single. She dated around, therefore she was a slut. And yet there was were many men in town who did the same damn thing. And there's like no term for that, right? And it always has irritated
no
me.
Negative term for it.
No negative term.
No negative connotation.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Because if someone were to try to make that a negative thing, it would always automatically be turned around to like, oh, what a stud,
Right.
You've got a stud or you've got a slut, right? So it always just irritated the hell out of me. So as I was thinking about, just writing a story, that just always, and by the way, like the character itself is not based on her like at all, but just like that concept. Mm-hmm. So I kind of started from there. It's like, who is that person? What is she going through? What, got her to that, place where like that was her, what she was known for. So it kind of started there. Everything else started from just a lot of general things that were going on, in the lives of people I knew. I knew people who were, in the middle of, getting divorced or, having a rough spot in their marriage. A lot of people close to me were struggling with addiction, whether it was alcohol, drugs. This was right around the time that like abuse of prescription opiates was really, really hitting hard in Maine. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the setting itself was where I lived. Maine used to be a place where someone could, if you're not the college kind of person, you could graduate high school, you could go work at a factory, a shoe shop, woolen mill, whatever. And it's hard work, but you can support your family. You've got insurance, and then that was going away. All those jobs were being shipped overseas. So all of these things were like stewing in my head. And so if you've ever read the book, that hopefully sounds familiar, all those things. And I just created a fictional town in which all of those things kind of like converged. And of course, all those things make great, problems, drama, which makes plot. So that's kind of how all that got started.
All the stones you can throw at your characters.
Exactly. Knock them out of the tree and then keep throwing rocks at them. So
now, Waiting for Spring is actually a traditionally published book, but it didn't start that way. You were one of the very few in the beginning that sort of did the indie publishing path. And I know this only because I turned to you when I was looking to publish, like, how did you do it? What did you do? And you were kind enough to say, this is what I did here. I don't know if I did it right, but this is what I did.
Pretty much.
Tell us a little bit about how you went from indie to becoming traditionally published. Like,
oh, sure. Yeah. So, of course, once I finished, my first draft, I realized I kind of have something here, but it's also kind of shitty. So I worked on several drafts. I am so fortunate that one of my good friends, Amy Rogers, plug for her, offered for free to like look at it from like an editing point of view. Mm. And then she sent it back with some nice things and then some kind of things. Fixed it again.
You know what? We love those things though. We need those things. We need
exactly.
Those things. Yeah.
So she was very kind to be like brutally honest, which by the way, every writer needs, but we all hate, but there it is.
Yeah.
So, but she really helped me to get it into a form that actually might be publishable. So I did all the things you're supposed to do. I wrote, the synopsis, the query letter. I researched the right, literary agents. I'm going to get this thing done. And I sent it out literally to hundreds, maybe not hundreds plural, but I know well over 100 anyway, literary agents. And I got some interest back. Hey, we'd like to read the first 3 chapters. Hey, we'd like to read, the whole book. And then they'd send it back to me saying, in fact, one said, I really love this book. I have literally no idea how I would ever market it. And I got really tired of hearing that. I'm like, well, fuck it, I'll market it, So I did research, and this was right around the time that the Kindle, Amazon Kindle had first come out, and ebooks were really just kind of starting. So
you got in on the ground floor.
Like literally the ground floor. I was so, in every way, I was just so fortunate, just the timing for this, right? And the people I knew. But so I did some research. The first thing I did actually, before I even tried the whole ebook thing, was I got one of those, oh my God, I don't even know if they still have them, like Google pages, like Google websites where you could, for free, host your own
They have
page.
Google site. Maybe that's the same thing.
Maybe that's what it was. It was, anyway, so I just copied and pasted the entire book just there. I'm like, read it, have at it, you know, whatever. Because what I was thinking is, hey, someone's going to like this, right? And then the next book I write, ha 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 ha. But anyway, the next book I write, maybe they'd be, you know, interested in reading that. It was just, I had no actual plan. I've never been to market. This is just me, you know, winging it. So, and then of course, knowing about Kindle, I did research. How do you format a book? How do you upload it? I got all that done. And then I finally was like, well, I think it would be nice to have an actual hard copy. So I did that too, self-published it. At the time, I had no idea that there was any like stigma. It was just I wrote a book. I think it's pretty good. Let's see if anyone wants to buy it. And then of course I found out in very short, you know, time that there was a huge stigma attached to it. You know, real authors, good authors aren't going to do this. All these self-published books are just, you know,
your book must be crap if you're publishing it there.
Exactly. Vanity projects. I mean, honestly, sure. I mean, that's, you know, a lot of them are. But I was like, fuck it. You know, I got involved in, there was a whole group of indie publishers at the time. Zoe Winters, Mariah Joven, Kristen Tetsi, a whole bunch of them. And we kind of like bonded together, giving each other tips. And at one point, are you familiar at all with J.A. Conrath? He is an author who at the time was very anti-self-publishing and used to write a lot of blogs anti-self-publishing. He has since come around because all of a sudden he's like, oh, maybe there's money in this. So, you know, anyway, it was like a very quick turnaround. But anyway, at the time he was very anti-self-publishing. And someone in his comment section mentioned my book. This is awesome. You should read this one and put a link to it. And all of a sudden it just started selling like crazy. So that caught the attention, of course, of Amazon, because they're like, what the hell's going on here?
Right.
And they had just started cottoning on to the fact that, hey, we could probably make some money here if we become a publishing house as well. And so Terry Goodman from, now it's called Lake Union Press, which is affiliated with Amazon, read it, approached me, and I'm like, yep, I'm on board with that. So
yes, please.
Yeah.
So it's always that strange tipping point that you can't predict. Right. You couldn't have marketed for that. You couldn't have like said, you know, you couldn't have planned for that chain of events to take place. But
if I had tried to plan it, it never would have worked that way. It was just one of those accidental cool kind of things. So yeah.
It never would have worked.
Yeah, that's how it happened.
So I know that you've just got this particular book out, but like you said before, you've got several different things that have started or finished or back burners or whatever. So
yeah,
what is your writing process like? Do you vary from project to project, or is it, you know what, this is pretty much the way I'm going to do it. This is how I know how to do it. That's it.
Right. Well, I will say that it varies wildly. In fact, with Waiting for Spring, I did not have an outline. I had basically a list of here's what I definitely want in this book. Here's what I definitely don't. Had some character sketches, and then I just went nuts. The older I get, the more I write, the more I need some sort of outline. I need to have something in mind, or else I'm just going to just wander all over the place. Right. So I'm actually working, I'm working on 3 projects now. Yes. Right. So each one I've got, oh my God, you're going to be so proud of me, Danielle.
I'm already proud of the fact that you said you have 3 projects done. That's just like, I'm beaming with pride.
So each one started with an outline, very, broad outline. And then from that outline, I would just kind of write, and then I would step back. And after I'd started writing, got the feel of the characters and the feel of the book, because every book, not only is it a different plot, but there's just something, the way it feels is different. So then I stepped back and actually started, oh my God, notebooks and everything, Danielle. I mean, I've got it's not as in-depth as yours, but I would almost go so far as to say I've got book Bibles for them. So I know, right? So I'm a grown-up now, Danielle.
I found that once you reach a certain age, it's more that I need them to remember the things that I've written, because I can't remember the character's name. I can't remember what color eyes I gave them. I can't remember it. So I need it as a reference point,
right?
Not as a, oh, look at me, aren't I so brilliant to come up with this? It's
right.
Because I can't remember it anymore.
The struggle is real.
Too many plots in the head. It's too many characters and too much. It's too much to hold on to. So the Bibles are that hold it on for me so that I can focus on other things.
For sure.
So I'm very excited to hear about these 3 projects, and I hope that one day you will let me read them.
Well, definitely. So do you want me to just talk to you about like the 3 very different things I got going on?
If you are willing to share, I would love to hear them.
Okay, so the first is something that some people watching this may have heard about or not. You and I, a while ago, got started on a book that we're writing together. And so I've been working lately on, first drafts are always rough. I mean, they're rough.
Yes.
And we did, I think, a very smart thing and stepped away from it for a while, right? So lately I've been going back to it and kind of, okay, what are the parts that just really aren't working for me? What would I like this to be instead? Knowing full well, of course, that I'm going to have to come to you with this because also it's your book too. But you know what I mean? Just like this, okay, what is missing? And then we can have that power. So I've been like, not actually writing on it, but like kind of storyboarding, I guess you could say. So anyway, so that's one thing I've been working on.
Fun.
The other thing is I started the very first I've ever even attempted this, a play, back when COVID began. Was it like 15 years ago? I don't remember how long we've been in
15
COVID.
or 16, somewhere around there.
Like that.
Yeah.
So, and of course, in all seriousness, it's a very quarantine specific kind of play. And since quarantine is still going on, it's so funny to look back at that first, the first few scenes I wrote. I'm like, oh, was that something we were dealing with back then? Because it's just I'm just writing scenes that don't necessarily go together yet. And so once all of this is done, I'm going to have to go through all those scenes and figure out what's the narrative here, like what's my
point? Maybe it's a sequence of different times in quarantine. This is where we were at the beginning. This was the middle of, how has quarantine like sort of shifted the longer it's gone on?
It's so crazy. So I'm gonna have to figure out something to do with all these like scenes, but that's kind of been fun. Also maybe a little bit of therapy, who knows? I mean, but
we do what we gotta do.
Right. And then of course the third one is what month are we in? Oh, well, this is March when this airs.
March,
so,
yes.
So NaNoWriMo was back in November. So it was a few months ago. Again,
wasn't that long ago.
Like 12 years ago, but so I have started on not a sequel, but a companion novel to Waiting for Spring. It's in the same like world, I guess. Different stories, kind of like what you're doing with I almost said Enigma because that's the book I'm looking at on your screen, but no, the Must Love Coffee, like that
series,
where it's like different characters but the same world. And so some of the main characters in Waiting for Spring are going to be like maybe mentioned briefly or very minor characters in the new one. So I've been working on that, which has been a lot of fun.
Right. Are you setting it in the same sort of time period or just the same town?
The same town, a little bit later. So let me see, Waiting for Spring, I mean, it's contemporary, but it was contemporary to like the mid 2000s. And
right.
What are we in, like the 23rd century now or something? But no, so it's so the characters, for example, you're going to see Brian and Tess, and they're going to be like roughly like maybe 10-ish years older. So I don't want to say too much more because that'll spoil the end of Waiting for Spring.
Right. Well, I'm very excited about all of these projects. Very good to know. Since sort of talking about books and writing in general, do you have a favorite part about writing, and on the flip side, a least favorite part about writing?
So honestly, my very favorite part is that moment when I've been writing for a while and all of a sudden something is like, I don't want to say possessing you because that sounds really gross, but almost like possessing you. And you know what that's like, right? When you're typing and you're writing and you forget that your fingers are moving, it's just this whatever
You're no longer in
experience.
charge. Somebody else is
Yes.
feeding you this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that so much. And my least favorite part is after you get out of that spell and then you look at what you've written and it's like, oh, a logical brain's gonna have to go and tweak that shit some, you know? So it's like
I'm sure there was
reality.
a nugget in there somewhere, but
right.
there's a lot of crap to sift through first.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's like, it's that moment of, because while that's happening, like, I am so awesome and this is just the best ever, you know, and then the reality hits, you're like, oh my God, I can't ever show anyone. But anyway, but then,
usually with some cleanup work, you can figure out, okay, this was what I really should have said, but you said it in all the wrong ways. I think, you know, that for me, the most favorite is that sort of first draft, that magical, nothing can go wrong with a first draft. I know you don't agree with that. You much prefer a second draft.
I am a second draft person. Usually that magical
much prefer
thing. So you like that first run through then?
I do. I love all the possibility that comes with a first draft. And I know that it does not have to be perfect. And I know that I can make mistakes here. So I know it's the exploring part. And then later drafts is when we dig out the map and go, okay, you charted one path.
Right.
Let's put it on a map now.
So for me,
let's see if we can get there shorter.
Right. No, I totally get that. Yeah. But for me, a first draft is hardly ever the actual story. It's almost like writing an outline, like in long form.
Yeah.
There's like, instead of narrating my character, it's like, okay, so on this day, she's going to do this. She's going to meet up with so-and-so. And this is a thing so that to me, that's a first draft, which I would never. In fact, the most horrifying moment of my writing life was after you and I had finished the first draft and you're like, can I look at it? And I'm like, do you have to? And so anyway, so for me,
that's because writers, we all come at it completely different. You sort of, you will write like sort of paragraphs about what you want to sort of happen in long form. And me, I'm like a dialogue vomiter. So I'll just get out what I want the characters to say and then later go, oh yeah, I'm actually gonna figure out what their bodies are doing or where they are in time and space. I'm like a vomit of just dialogue. So everybody just works a little differently and there's no wrong way to do it. So you can't edit what's not written.
Exactly. Yeah. So for me, that second draft is usually when that whole magic piece starts, because it's like, now that I know what's going to happen, let's just get in there.
Right. So, now that I know where we're going, let's buckle the seatbelt.
Yeah. It's funny.
You're one of those people that needs the maps in hand first.
Right. Like a little GPS.
Right. And then once we know where we're going, we can then start the car.
Yes. It's funny because you will get this as an actress, method acting.
Yeah.
I kind of think there's a such thing as method writing. Like when you're just like, you're in the head of your character, you almost become that person.
Sure.
So that's usually what happens in draft 2 for me.
Yeah. Now I wanted to touch upon this. You write in a pen name. Your name is not RJ Keller.
It's not.
I don't want to out you for who you are, but I just wanted to talk to you about why you chose to write in a pen name. Do you like it? Would you keep it? I mean, like, just tell me a little bit pros and cons about maybe a pen name. And
yeah, sure. So initially I decided to have a pen name because my kids were like junior high school when I was thinking, hey, I'm actually going to publish this thing or get it published. And anyone who has not read Waiting for Spring yet, there's some little schmixy stuff going on there, right? Because
there's some adult content.
Some adult content.
Yes.
It would, if it was a movie, it would definitely be rated R.
Rated R.
So like my biggest fear was my kids were going to be in the hallway and, oh, did your mom write that book with the blowjob in the shower? Like,
that's
I just didn't want that to happen.
Very valid concern.
Right.
And I wish I had considered that before writing.
100%. And I'm going to tell you, like, high school is hard enough without that shit like that happening. So I'm like, all right, I got to write, with a pen name. So, and then my next thing was, and of course, this is before I was thinking about genre or anything. I also knew that, no dig on dudes or anything, but men are going to be a lot less likely to pick up a book written by a woman. So I'm like, I would rather have some initials going on there. So, of course, I don't mind telling you my real name is Kelly. And so I wanted like something like that to be my last name. And I chose the initials R and J kind of after my brothers, Rob and Jim. I just thought it'd be kind of a cool thing to,
Nice.
to do that. And of course, RJ Kelly, I didn't want to be mistaken for that dude who pees on little girls and stuff. So I chose that too. Yeah, right. So I changed it to Keller, and that's how I came up with my pen name. But
I did not know that story. So
yeah. So, and of course, I mean, generally speaking, it's fine because I can do that thing where like my real life is me, and then the author stuff, oh, that's the stuff that happens to that other person, to that RJ Keller.
yeah.
But and so when I first started on social media, I started, for example, Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff, thinking it was just going to be a place for me to like, pimp my books. And then of course it quickly became something where, oh, I was getting to know people, and oh yeah, I'll add my, my mom and my cousin and my friends in real life. And it just became really messed up.
Yeah.
So I kind of think, like, looking back, I think I might not choose to have a pen name, just because it does muddy some things up. But and of course the other problem is, a couple of years ago, Facebook got on that kick of when people started having like fake profiles to
Yeah.
do harm. They were cracking down on that. So I had to change my Facebook back to my real name anyway. It does get confusing. So I think if someone's debating, should I have a pen name or not, just maybe do a better job of separating your author social media presence with your real life social media presence. So, there's nothing wrong with it per se, but it can get a little muddy if you're not careful.
Yeah. I think, and the only reason that I did not choose a pen name was primarily because I really didn't understand how to logistically do that.
Right.
And like still get paid and still make sure that people knew that I couldn't see the path to make that
Right.
connection. It just seemed too complicated for me.
Yeah.
Now that my kids are in high school and I have written lots of books,
Yep.
I really don't want them to read ever.
Mm-hmm.
I do worry about that a little bit, but I've also just recently written a young adult, and neither of them have any desire to read that. So I think that they just don't have any desire to read anything that their mother has read ever. So I think I'm okay in terms of that, unless one of their friends reads it and says, "Oh my God, have you?" That's really the only fear that I have, is one of their friends might read something.
And that did happen to me, and I was mortified. I mean, I could not have been more mortified if I tried. So yeah.
For now, I'm living in denial that that's going to happen.
Yeah. What I meant to say, Danielle, is that will never happen.
Thank you.
Never have to worry about. That's what I meant to say.
My kids won't care enough about any books that I've read to ever want to read them. So I'm going to go with that. Speaking of mortifying words that you would not want people to hear, would you like to read something from this book that will maybe make us blush or not? You don't have to read something that makes us
I'm not
blush,
gonna. Nothing so much to make you blush. And of course, I don't want to, read any like plot points or anything.
Right.
I just thought I would read something to give you an idea of like the voice or the style.
Yes, that would be lovely.
Alrighty, so it's near the beginning. That's right, you can't see because of the, oh no, yep, there we go.
Hold it just the right way.
And of course, this shows you how big it is. Again,
that's a big book.
Murder Weapon City.
Yeah.
So it's in the beginning of the book, and like I said, nothing plot heavy here, just a little funny kind of thing.
With your style, for sure.
Yes. So our protagonist, Tess, is in a bar. She's been kind of stewing over, hey, that cute dude who lives, in the apartment below me, should this be a thing, that kind of thing. And so she's kind of stewing. And alrighty, I was startled out of my meditations by a voice that asked, "Can I buy you a beer?" I looked up from my celery. I hadn't noticed that a man had taken a stool a few seats over from me. He was about 40 or so, good looking but arrogant. He'd done the bar a favor by walking in, and the stool an even greater one by sitting his precious ass down on it. And now he was about to do me the greatest honor of all. The kind of guy who I knew from bitter and disappointing experience would be shitty in the sack. Then there was another thing, the insignia on his baseball cap. Even in my present mood, even if there was no Brian dancing in the back of my mind, the man would never have stood a chance. I hid a smirk. No thanks, I'm all set. Just one? Seriously, no thanks, I'm heading home in a minute. Not all alone, I hope. He let his eyes slip down a little farther south than they should have and let them linger there too long. If the alternative is going home with you, then I'm better off alone. He rolled his eyes. You don't think you're getting a little too old to be so picky? New in town, first time at this bar. A business to consider. It didn't matter. He had pushed every single one of my hot buttons, and all in less than a minute. I sat up straighter in my stool and looked him squarely in the eye. Yep, I am wicked old now, and I'll admit that life's been rough. So rough that it's left me with only 2 rules when it comes to men. 1, I don't fuck Yankee fans. 2, I don't fuck assholes. I'm afraid you're disqualified on both counts. So that is a little introduction to Tess Daya, our protagonist.
Oh, I love her so much.
Oh, actually, I do too.
She says the stuff that,
yeah,
I wish more of us said.
Right? Needs to be said.
Yes. Yes. Now, where can people buy this book now that they've heard you read it? Where can they get it? Where can they put their hot little hands on it?
Right, great question. So, of course, online retailers, we're talking Amazon, Barnes and Noble, etc., etc. Basically, if you Google "Waiting for Spring," R.J. Keller, all sorts of places.
There's even an audio version of it. Yes,
there is an audio. Yes, you can get that on Audible. You can get it on Libro, which I love Libro because Libro is just like a smaller thing. But you can, when you join Libro, you can attach that account to one of your local bookstores, and so every time you purchase an audiobook from Libro, you're actually helping out a local bookstore. So just want to put a little plug in for that. Yes. Also, speaking of local bookstores, if you go to yours and don't find it there, ask them, hello, might I please support your wonderful business by obtaining this book from you?
Yes, and you can ask that of your local libraries as well.
Or your local library, absolutely. Yeah.
Because that's how authors will get on the shelves if people ask for them.
Yep.
Anything else that you wanted to talk about before we wrap up here? Is there anything I missed or anything you wanted to mention?
No, actually, I think this has been pretty thorough. You're an excellent interviewer.
Well, yes, I am.
Yes, you are.
Well, on that note,
I do miss hanging out with you.
That does it for us. Tune in next month. Our theme will be later in life romance novels with guest LB Dunbar. This has been Danielle Bannister with guest
RJ Keller
for Writers on Writers. Goodbye, all. Thanks for stopping by.